Welcome to IndoctriNation, a weekly conversation series about protecting yourself from systems of control. I'm your host, Rachel Bernstein.
Hello, everybody. Today on the show, we have Michael Yoder. Michael lives in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, and he was involved in Landmark in the mid-2000s, but started noticing some disturbing elements to the program. Volunteering for the Forum, the Landmark program, he realized that this program to quote-unquote transform people didn't really do that. Volunteers were treated like slaves, and that experience caused him to leave completely. Finding limited information about Landmark, he started exploring Scientology and started to see the connections. Michael's first novella, The Scattering of Ashes, is an exploration of his time at Landmark and includes inferences to Scientology and Jehovah's Witnesses. He was introduced to Landmark around 2008, and he participated in the Forum and the Advanced course and assisted a friend in his own work on the Introduction Leaders Program, the ILP. After these, he assisted as a volunteer with the Forum where he saw, quote-unquote, the man behind the curtain, and his eyes were open. He went on to investigate Landmark and its founder and other esoteric ideologies that were of interest to him because of this. He is an interesting man, and it was great to talk to him. Here is Michael now. I am delighted to have Michael Yoder with me today. This was really kind of a spontaneous and fortuitous thing that happened where I was able to reach out to you to see if you were interested in coming on the show, because I felt like over time of you listening to podcast episodes, seeing things on YouTube, and that you would respond always with a very thoughtful and knowledgeable comment. I thought, here is a person who listens to the show regularly, but more importantly, has a lot of information to share. And I felt like there were little hints of it, and it made me curious about where all your info and your insights are coming from, and then to find out how much you've researched, how much you've done, and the book you've published. It's interesting the way this connection was made. And so I would love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself to the listeners at who you are and what you do, and also what you wrote that is a very interesting book with some really interesting information that I'm sure we're going to get into today. So go for it.
Well, first, thank you very much for having me on. I'm absolutely honored. Michael Yoder, I live in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. I'm a writer and composer, and more lately a composer. I live a quiet life with my cat. But my experiences have been, I've been down rabbit holes, I think, and it all started with Landmark, and then learning about Scientology. And I follow Alan Watts, and I found out all kinds of things about Werner Erhard and Alan Watts. And and I'm also interested in analogies. So I used, like, a couple times I've used quotes and comments from Alice in Wonderland or Stephen Sondheim's lyrics, and because they have meaning. And I think one way that we can understand some of the things that we go through is to find those analogies in popular culture that really speak to us and say, okay, that sounds like that's what I went through, or that I'm relating to that. So that's kind of who I am.
That's really interesting. So tell me also about what you compose.
Well, right now I'm working on a suite of dances, but I'm also working on a musical based on Lizzie Borden, which is quite a deep dive. She was in that whole thing was a very interesting interesting and twisted sort of plots line. Yeah, lots of intrigue.
Wow.
Secrets. So, but yeah, no, I compose mostly sort of classical music. I would call it.
Mm-hmm. So, what I'm curious about too is, the analogies, with just finding out about, Stephen Sondheim, whose show I had just seen before you gave your comment, which was really interesting. And also with Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland is a book that is often quoted in Scientology and by L. Ron Hubbard, and unironically, which is really incredible that I think people only see how ironic it was after they've left a lot of the time. And just the idea of going down the rabbit hole and that being an analogy to, through the looking glass, that there is a lot to talk about when things like and life is like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. Big is small and small is big and up is down, and words just mean different things. So it is very cult-like, actually, in so many ways. I'm wondering about you and what drew you initially to Landmark, if you don't mind sharing that piece with us.
I was actually dating a guy who was involved with Landmark, and my partner had passed away in 2003, and then I ended up burning out from a job, and I was in this kind of an at sea place, quotes and quotes, like not quite knowing where am I going, what am I doing with my life, and was seeing this guy who was very involved, and he said, "Well, you should go to the forum." And I didn't even know what Landmark was. No clue. And there just happened to be in my city an introductory session. And that's the hook. That's what brings you in. I know in Scientology, they have the personality profile they do on people. Landmark's different. And the introductory session it was engaging. It was fun. The guy who was running it was very articulate, but he was funny. So there was this kind of sense of play involved. And so I thought at the end of it, well, maybe this is something I should try out. And of course, at the end of it, if you sign up tonight, there's a 25% off.
What a coincidence.
I know,
Uh-huh.
yeah. They like to do that. 25% off or 10% off yeah. So that's what got me into going to the forum. But once you're in the forum, it changes.
So yeah, let's definitely talk about that, because a couple things. First, when people first heard about Landmark, they heard about EST, and then the forum, and then Landmark. And Landmark had a forum weekend, or had a forum as part of Landmark. And so the name has continuously changed, often after there have been lawsuits, often after there have been exposés done, so that it becomes sort of like a way to launder their reputation, I think, to start all over again and rebrand. But there is something really interesting about these free or low fee introductory courses that really can draw you in. I also want to mention, before we go back to your time being introduced to the forum, with the personality test, which you've probably heard me talk about on the show, but I always want to give people this information because they are still being passed out. They are still the way in to a lot of Scientology centers, and people are standing out there handing them out. And they are called the Oxford test, and they have nothing to do with Oxford University, Oxford anything. They were just called that so it sounded high and legit. They're printed often on pink pieces of paper, so they seem innocuous and friendly. There's a lot of psychology that's already going into it. And the thing that most people don't know that. Again, you may have heard me say, and I'm so grateful to this person who told me this years ago, that the personality test is sort of the beginning of the mind control and gaslighting, because it tells you all the things that are wrong with you that you need Scientology courses for. And the way they have decided what is wrong with you is the most head spinning part, which is that it was developed by a friend of L. Ron Hubbard's. And L. Ron Hubbard, who had many psychiatric disorders, was the first person to take the test. So his answers are considered the best answers and are considered the ones that signal the highest level of health and psychological health. But it's quite the opposite. So already down is up and up is down. And so if you get an answer different than L. Ron Hubbard's, which I would hope for people to get, you are then seen as having that as a problem. And then they have a class for that. So the healthier you are, the more problematic and in need of help you come across on this personality test. So already the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, in real life. So it's fascinating to learn this level of detail, to really see how the control and manipulation starts from the start, actually. It's really interesting.
It does, and I think that's with Landmark, the introductory session. I don't know whether S had anything like that as a hook, but the introductory session is kind of like, it's the start of the rabbit hole, but it's pleasant. It's that warm, sunny afternoon where you're relaxed, and then once you get to the forum, it collapses, and that's when you're called, like, your life is crap, and we're going to fix it.
Wow. Okay. So let's get into detail about that. So you go to this meeting and it's warm and pleasant. How is it warm and pleasant? What do they do?
Well, the man who was leading he was very funny, very, very, a very amiable man. He cracked a lot of jokes, even some sort of physical humor, which was interesting. So it made people laugh. It brings down your guard. I think John Hunter's talked about that sort of sense of got to bring down their guard, get them in. But it also starts you on the process of understanding about the basics of Landmark and possibility and creating possibility in your life, but doesn't explain it fully. So there's always that's the hook that they want to, like, here's the bait.
Right.
Here's the bait.
Right. Okay. Okay. Interesting. So here's a teaser, right? And then they want you to sign up. So then what happens next? Where does that shift start to happen?
Well, at the forum, and for me, I had to travel from Victoria over to Vancouver because the center, at that time, there is only one center and it's in Vancouver. So it means a ferry ride and then having to find accommodation. You have to pay for all your food. You have to pay. All they give you is water for the amount of money that you pay. And you're in a room full of 80 people. And what happens is almost immediately, well, they start by explaining the process of possibility and drawing circles on a whiteboard, and this is what you know, and this is what you know you don't know, and this is what you don't know that you don't know. And it's very head spinning, kind of like, okay, and I don't know where this is going. And then pretty quickly, and I'm going back a long time now, so I'm trying to remember as much as I can. You have to get to a space where you declare your intention of a possibility. Everybody has to. And we all have to stand up in front of a room full of 80 people. The funniest thing is, the first thing that I noticed about the room is that the way they set up their chairs is terrible. It's not theater seating, it's squared. So every time you want to look at the person, the forum leader, you kind of have to crane your neck around the person who's in front of you just to see what's going on or try and read the board or whatever. Anyway, we all have to go up and start talking about our lives. So it's the confessional aspect, the same way that Scientology has the confessional aspect in their auditing. It's the same kind of thing. And then you have to declare, like after all that's done, you declare your possibility. And I frankly did not have one in my head, but the pressure is so strong. Like the pressure is really strong from the beginning. So I made something up. And it was something like, I want to be strong and independent. And that's what I'm supposed to work on for the rest of the forum.
Okay. Wow. And the phrase is declare your intention
To create a possibility.
To create a possibility. Okay.
The possibility of whatever.
Right. A possibility of, and then fill in the blank. Okay. And I want to certainly talk about the language here because that doesn't really mean much of anything, but it sounds very deep, right?
Well, and they refer like the same way that Scientology does. They refer to what they're doing as technology. Just saying, we have a bunch of exercises that'll help you find something out. Doesn't sound very sexy, and it's certainly less marketable than technology, because technology is impressive.
Okay. So it's interesting, right? Similar language. And so we'll get to the connections into your book for sure. I'm wondering then, with you just deciding to declare something, and then that's the thing that you have to stick with, you already, I think, can feel like you're now, like you've buckled up for this ride, right? Like, okay, I just declared something. Now I have to stay with it, and they're going to take me along this path somehow. I don't know what it's going to look like and what it's going to mean, but I just signed up. Is that how it feels?
Yeah, the pressure's on to participate. You have, I think they give you 45 minutes, after which, if you decide you want to stay, you stay. If after 45 minutes you don't want to stay, you can get a refund. But most people don't. I don't think anybody left my group at that time.
Okay. And so what happens if you don't stay? I mean, if you just decide to go, are you given a hard time? Is it made public? Is there shaming?
I think not as much as Est. When Est was doing it, it was really strict. They locked the doors. Essentially, you couldn't go to the bathroom. But a Landmark, like, at least had, like, if you needed to go, you could go. But yeah, there's a pressure. There's a pressure. And it starts to be like a group pressure to stay, no matter how silly things seem to be.
Okay. And so let's talk about that. How do they seem potentially silly?
Well, I say silly. It's very serious work, because you're improving yourself. You're making your life better. The exercises, some of them were simply sitting with a partner and talking about a piece of a relationship, and you're not allowed to take notes. Note taking is verboten. You're not allowed to, but you do have a book and a pad and a pen to write different things down according to the exercises. So I remember pairing up with an older woman, and I think I was talking about my relationship with my brother, which was always strained. He hated me since I was born.
Oh,
Because
no.
he was
Oh.
5 years old when I was born. I came along, and I was a colicky baby, so I took all the attention away from the little prince. And he did not like me after that.
Yes, there should be a whole counseling course, I think, just called dethroning. Like there are a lot of kids, right, who have the issue of being dethroned. And it sometimes stays with you and stays with them and stays with their siblings a lifetime. Anyway, sorry that you had to deal with that. Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay. But anyway, so that kind of an exercise. There were other exercises on different days. I'm trying to remember them all because there's so many. Because they keep you going. Like you don't get when you go on a break, you work. You start at 9 o'clock in the morning. You might be finished by 10, maybe a little later. One of the exercises on, I think it was the second day, probably the second day, was essentially what I looked up was it was Scientology's TR0, which is where you sit across from somebody and just stare at them. Now, it doesn't go on for hours. In Landmark, it goes on for just, maybe 5 minutes, 5, 10 minutes at the most. And that's to try and get you to see yourself in the other person or see them in you. And some of it's really good. A lot of Taoism, which is like my Werner's connection to Werner was quite friendly with Alan Watts. He went to Sausalito and spent a lot of time with Alan Watts, I found out. And so he picked up a lot of Zen Buddhism and Taoism, and that got eventually sort of worked into Landmark. One of the things they do at the very beginning is they talk about on the third day, you're going to pop like popcorn.
Okay. What does that mean?
So it's like it's a night, Saturday, and a full day Sunday, or a half day Sunday maybe. But popping like popcorn is like that's when the lights will go on, and you'll suddenly realize, oh, my life is wonderful now.
Okay.
I have been awakened.
Uh-huh. Okay. That's so interesting already. Just the idea that they are going to tell you when that's going to happen,
Yes.
which is an impossibility, but does set people up for the social psychology and the social contagion that's going to be happening that next day of people popping like popcorn because otherwise you haven't somehow done it right. I don't know if people feel ready for that, whatever that means, because most people don't think, "Oh, I can't wait till I start popping like popcorn." Like it's not a thing that we have even a frame of reference for. So you'd have to almost wait until someone else does something or says something so you know, aha, that's what that looks like. And then you need to potentially feel like you have to join in. Is that what it feels like that day?
I would say that's accurate. It's very much the group, like Dr. Hunter talked about, hypomania, and you reach that point on the third day. So they build you up over the first. They break you down, which is how it works. They break you down, and then you choose how you want to be built up. And then the next, and all the processes and all the exercises you go through are in that process of enlightenment, of
Right.
enlightenment.
Okay. Okay. So interesting. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about Alan Watts too, because you mentioned him. I know that I don't know actually a lot about him. I know that I think he was British and he was a writer and speaker, but what was the connection between him and Warner Earhart?
Well, Alan Watts was British. He lived in Sausalito on a ferry boat. He was a philosopher, mostly around Zen Buddhism and Taoism. This is big thing. But apparently, and I don't know how they met, but Werner must have somewhere heard about him and went to Sausalito and hung out with him and was quite friendly with him. And I think that was post, I don't know whether it was post his like Werner Scientology stint. It might have been it might have been like at the same time as, because I know like Alan Watts died, I think in the early 70s. Werner would have been there around 69, 70. And I'm not sure when Werner was in Scientology, but I mean, they were all those pieces were fitting together.
Yeah, I know he lived. I just remember hearing about him being bohemian, and he lived in a place called Druid something. I don't know why I remember this level of detail. And then he had alcoholism, but I don't know a lot else. Okay. Interesting. Okay, so they were connected, and so there was this sort of, you could tell there was an infusion into Landmark of these different kinds of philosophies and teachings.
Yes, because I already had started listening to Alan Watts and reading the Tao Te Ching and recognizing, oh, okay, this is all sounding very Taoist to me. Like the idea of one of the things in Landmark is, which is very Taoist, is a thing happens and you put meaning on it. So we're meaning making creatures. We look for meaning, and Taoism says the same thing. A thing happens, the Tao, which is the way, the universe, it doesn't care. It has no time for people. It just exists. So we put meaning on what happens to us. And one of the key phrases in Landmark that I've heard used by other people too is empty and meaningless. Life is empty and meaningless, and it's empty and meaningless because it's empty and meaningless, which is again very much like Alice in Wonderland. Where am I now? Who are you? Said the caterpillar. Who are you?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So interesting. Right. And so ascribing meaning to things then is seen as what? Is it a bad thing, good thing? Is it just seen as an inaccurate thing?
It's seen as your story.
Your
It's
story.
called your
Gotcha.
story. What's your story?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So something happens and you put a story on it. So in my relationship with my older brother, I'm the one responsible for the story, not him. So he has no part to play. No one has any part to play in my life except me, which is, um, I think, inaccurate. I mean, people play a part in our lives. Certainly, I would think for parents, like I'm not a parent, but parents and their kids play a significant role in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Well, absolutely.
I've heard you talking about your kids and
Yeah.
how important and significant they are in your life.
Sure.
We shape each other in
Right.
many ways. Our relationships shape each other, like help us shape each other. I learn from people, and hopefully they learn something from me.
I hope that, when people kind of go through their life, they get to see who they want to invite into their life, who can have the kind of impact that they want, or who they can help have an impact on, because we are social beings, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think I look at that whole idea, that philosophy that has woven its way into a lot of New Age thinking, that because I see it through a skeptical lens, I see it as a way for the leadership to not have to take responsibility for the impact they're having on you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I mean I've seen it with other cults as well. Like not just with Landmark, but with Scientology, with the Jehovah's Witnesses, with Mormonism. It's all about we the head people. We're not responsible. You're responsible. You're the one that's in charge, and anything that screws up in your life, that's on you. That's not on us. Because if you'd been doing what we said, things wouldn't be screwed up.
Right, which already makes the equation faulty, because if people can't impact each other, then they can't impact each other in a positive way either. So Landmark is going to have no impact on you, according to this idea, if we follow the equation in every direction. But I'm sure they want to take responsibility. They want to have business. They want to have repeat customers. They want to be able to say, if something good happens, that's because of us. But if no one has an impact on anyone else, then already they're not even following their own equation.
True, absolutely true. It's a weird. I don't even know where it's in a dichotomy. It's a paradox. We can fix you if you do what we say, but if you don't do what we say, it's all on you. But it's all on you anyway, because we have nothing to do with it. It's there is I just heard a Canadian commentator talking about the tariffs that are currently going on, in the trade war. And he said that what he sees is he calls it weaponized uncertainty.
Ooh. Ooh, I
And I
like that.
loved that. I thought,
Yeah.
that's that's what I went through, is weaponized uncertainty. You walk into a room and it's like, we're going to knock you off your feet. We're going to make you be so uncertain through the entire process. You won't know what's going on, but you'll listen to us because we know what's going on. So you can't be certain of what you're thinking or feeling. You can only be certain of what we're telling you.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Right. And so, yes, I hear this all the time in every kind of cultic group. I mean, everyone sort of says it, that anything bad that happens to you is because of you, anything good is because of the leader, all of that. And even I think about people who are narcissistic in relationship, they they very liberally use the I told you so's. Like, if things didn't work out, well, you should have listened to me, or I told you this, or it didn't work out because you didn't wait to get my permission, my instruction. And even if you did get my permission or my instruction, if things didn't work out, it's because you didn't somehow do it right.
Yeah.
But it's still on you.
Yep. That's how it works.
Wow.
As crazy as it sounds, that's how it works. And it is through the looking glass, totally through the looking glass. And what's the part where the Red Queen is, Alice and the Red Queen are running and running and running and running, but they're not getting anywhere. And Alice says, they finally stop, and Alice says, well, we're in the same place. And the Red Queen says, well, what did you expect? And Alice says, well, in my country, if you ran that far and that fast, you'd certainly get somewhere. And the Red Queen just says, well, that's a slow sort of country. Here, if you want to get anywhere, you have to run twice as fast as that. Which is, again, setting people up for, like, no, you're not doing enough. You're not doing enough. You're not doing enough.
Right. Right. Because then if you're in a cult and we follow that scene, then you run twice as fast. You still don't get anywhere because the system isn't built to get you anywhere. And then they can say whatever it was that you didn't do right after. And then you try again and you try again and you try again. Wow. Oh, it sounds exhausting as I'm even just talking about it. Okay. So I also but I want to hear more about your experience. And then I have a question about the word transformation, actually. So tell me more about what happened while you were there. And I think also what really kind of turned you off at some point and was the reason that you left.
Okay, so I went through the forum, and on the last, or not the last day, I was in tears, hypomania. It's all coming together. Yes, but it's like painful, and it's okay to be in pain and get rid of the pain. Then the Tuesday night, then there's a day in between. Tuesday evening, they have a session. It's kind of like a graduation session. People could get up and say like, oh, I've created the possibility of whatever. And one man was brave enough, and I thought really brave enough, because people chided him for it, got up and said, and he was a guest. He wasn't a participant, he was a guest. Because you're supposed to bring guests because you, of course, want to enroll them into taking the forum. That's the whole trick, is you're supposed to bring people in. So anyway, he got up and said, you people could have got all this from books for free.
Wow. Yeah.
And I sat there and I thought, he's right. Even after having been through everything I had been through and coming out that way, I thought, yeah, I know you're right. you're right. He's right. But people were immediately on him for it because that's going against the principles of the forum. Anyway, so that's forum.
Wow.
And then of course they have the advanced course, which is going to be 10% off if you sign up tonight. So I did. And back then it was a lot cheaper than it is now, but it was still a chunk of money for me. And it all went on a credit card, which is what they do. And they'll even help you increase your credit card if you need to. They'll make phone calls, just like Scientology. They'll do that. So went through the advanced course, remember very little of the advanced course, frankly. I don't. I think it was just more of the same, only let's spend more time looking at your integrity and more possibilities and strengthening your authenticity and all this stuff. What turned me off was when I volunteered, because the guy I was dating I went through all this stuff. He said, well, you should volunteer for the forum, volunteer to do the forum, to help set up. And I thought, well, okay. So, no, oh, wait, let me back up. There was something in between. And the in-between bit was there's a thing called home introductory courses or home introductory sessions. And the guy I was seeing was working to become an introductory leader. So I offered my house and invited 5 friends to come and participate. And he went through it. He went through the whole thing, and it was just kind of like a regular introductory session. But then at the end, when my friends had left, none of them signed up to do the forum because they were ready to sign them up then. But they're all on limited income and couldn't do it. But the guys were talking about, because he had 2 observers with him, they all started talking about well, why is she so reluctant to sign up? Why do you think he was so reluctant to sign up? And I thought, wait a minute, that's what is this not about choice?
Yeah, right.
Can't they choose?
Mm-hmm.
So they chose not to. I mean, that's something else in Landmark is choose. Chocolate, vanilla, choose. But at the same time, no, you can't choose. You should be doing the course. So that raised a red flag for me. I'm thinking, wait a minute. Then I went to volunteer for the forum. And that was the experience that really knocked it out for me. I only went one night. No, a night and a day. I got there at 6:00. You start at 6. We finished at midnight setting up. The chairs, I may be giving away trade secrets here, so I hope they don't come after me. The chairs have to be aligned perfectly in rows. They had to be separated exactly 18 inches from front to back. They had to be separated by the width of a tissue box. Exactly. So everything had to be, and they use the word impeccable. So I now actually have a visceral reaction to the word impeccable. Because they use that over and over and over. It's got to be impeccable. Got to be impeccable. Then the forum leader finally came in to look at the room. She went up to the front of the room, stood on the stage, looked down the center of this, and this one was being held in Victoria, so at least I didn't have to travel. She stood in the center of the stage and she said, "The room's not centered. I can't work with this." And she was really angry. So we then had to get a tape measure and measure the entire room from side to side, find out where the exact middle was, and then realign all of the chairs 4 inches. It was off by 4 inches. And I thought, this is insane. I mean, we did it. And fortunately, someone was smart enough to put tape down so we knew for the next day. So we finished that, come back the next day. You have to be there I think I had to be there by 7:00 in the morning for setup, just to make sure everything was where it was supposed to be. And people started coming in for the forum, and it went on the way mine did. And I started realizing, wait a minute, this is the same wording. This is the same everything. So it's a formula. Nothing changes. from beginning to, and I could hear from outside the room or inside the room, like see where exactly what she was doing was the same formula, same format, same quotes at the end to be inspiring. And I deal with hypoglycemia. So I hadn't eaten since like 6:30 in the morning. Now about 11, it's not break time, but I really thought I need to eat or I'm going to pass out. So I went to the forum the attendant, who was this young woman, very young, and it was practically begging her. I said, I need 10 minutes to go eat. And she just kind of looked at me and shook her head and said, all right. But it was clearly I was breaking the rules. And I just started thinking more and more like, what is this? We're being treated like slaves. We're not getting paid for this. You're not being generous to us in any way. And there's nothing in this. This is empty and meaningless. And then I really thought, yeah, no, this is empty and meaningless. And then at the end of the night, we had to pack everything up, pack all the chairs up because the cleaning people had to come in. And I, at that point, thought, I can't come back. I can't do this. So I phoned in and just said, I have back problems anyway, but I didn't really at that point. I said, I put my back out. I can't come in. And I was just like, I'm done. And I went to one seminar. They offer you 5 seminars. I went to one, and the woman was really berating people in the seminar group who hadn't met their goals. You're supposed to set goals for yourself. And one guy said, well, I haven't been able to do that. And she was really berating him. And I thought, this is cruel. Like, things happen in people's lives. Like, why are you being so nasty to this guy who just couldn't do it? And then just before the break happened, she announced, of course, a new course. We have a new technology, and it's all based on neuroscience and brainwaves, and it's going to happen in Seattle, and it only costs. And I thought, no, this is just a big scam to make money. In the end, it's about making money. And that was like the absolute last night. And I left at the break and thought, no.
That's so interesting. I'm glad that you thought nope. Because it sounds like it was wearing you down, but also just emotionally, just what, here I am volunteering and I'm working hard and I'm doing something, but what for? And also, am I kind of feeding the coffers, right, of something that I don't really believe in anymore? And so then, were you bothered by them after saying that you weren't going to be coming back? Did they?
Oh yeah. Well, no, actually, I didn't. No, I just ghosted them. But I did get calls. I kept getting calls until I finally said, I do not want you to call me. I want you to take my name off your list and never contact me again. And finally that stopped it. But they would like at least once a night. And from what I've heard from staff, like former staff people, because I didn't know any staff people then, is that no, you have to meet your targets. They had targets to meet the same way as in Scientology. They have to, like, the reg people have to meet their targets.
Yes, right.
So,
keep their stats up.
Yeah, keep their stats up.
Right.
Exactly. So that's why they were calling me until I told them no.
Okay. Interesting. Also, you brought up the word transformation before. And this is such an interesting word to me because it's another meaningless word that sounds very heavy and it sounds pivotal. But it's not necessarily positive. It's a neutral word, transformation, because you can transform into anything. You can transform in a positive way, in a negative way. I mean, but I wonder if it's another one of these kinds of goals that's set, that's amorphous. So you don't know really if you've achieved it. And maybe then they're the only ones who can let you know if you've achieved it because you don't know where the finish line is and what it's supposed to look like and what you're supposed to feel like. And how was that word used when you were there?
Most like during the forum, definitely transformation is the goal. The goal is to be transformed. So you will have a transformed life. And I thought, okay, what does that like? But that's where you create the possibility of whatever, and you will transform into that, which doesn't happen. People like I heard somebody, a former staff member recently, not recently, a little while ago, wrote up a post I read talking about how he said nobody's transformed. I wasn't transformed. People don't get transformed, and so it's like life is messy. Ultimately, you're not transformed. Life is messy. You have good times and you have bad times, up times and down times, and that's all part of just being a human being. And you don't have to transform yourself. I mean, the number of apparently divorces that happen after people go through the forum is quite high because they decide, well, I'm transformed now and I don't like my relationship. I've never really been happy with you. And so I'm going to go off and live a better life. So they get divorced, which is just nuts because it's just a course. It's a course with a bunch of exercises.
Right. So, two things about that. One is how are relationships or connections to other people talked about? People who are not involved, especially. And then what does it feel like to suddenly have your eyes opened and leave when this was supposed to hold so much, pardon the expression, possibility? And so, yeah, I'm curious about connections to people on the outside and how that's talked about, if it's talked about, and what it was like for you emotionally after leaving.
Um, Connections with people on the outside, I think, well, some people have better relationships. Some people actually do improve relationships. So, like, Landmark doesn't take everything away. They do give you some tools. Mind you, there are tools that you could get from books, but their sense of people who aren't involved in the forum or Landmark is that they're not awake, quotes and quotes. Like they don't get it. They're running their own rackets and they're doing their own stuff and they're like, yeah. And for me, so when I left though, how did I feel? I felt betrayed, a great sense of betrayal. I felt angry. I mean, all those sort of the stages of grief thing. Like I had to go through all that. Like I'm betrayed. Like you took my money, but you didn't give me anything substantive. You gave me bits and pieces that I could use, but nothing substantive. And you gave me a whole language that nobody understands. Like one of the words they use is getting complete. You have to get complete. So I actually did that with a guy he'd been my boss and essentially framed me so he could fire me. And I met with him because I wanted to get complete. And I said, I didn't handle myself well with you. And so I just want to be open and honest about that. And he actually said, I didn't do so well either. So that worked out okay. And there are times when it's just about being honest. But it's not being authentic. It's about just being honest.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Interesting. And getting complete. Yeah, all these words so interesting because they sound so all-encompassing. And yes, there are some techniques, as you're saying, that could be useful, I guess, if they go well. Because what if you went to go get complete, so to speak, and this person who you're talking to doesn't want to talk to you or they don't handle it well? Then what? Is it still considered getting complete?
I don't know how they'd look at that. I'm not sure how they would look at that. I would suppose because it's all about me, as long as I've done my part, if that person accepts that or doesn't accept that, that's their part. I mean, that's something I've learned even in my own life. I own my own stuff. If I screw up, I own that. If somebody else screws up, they own that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the whole idea of what you're responsible for. is for some people very motivational and for other people really disabling and overwhelming and self-blaming in a way that can feel extreme. Also, I think to take into consideration people's natures. There are some people who lean more towards taking responsibility, feeling guilt more easily. And so they're going to take that on and it's going to speak to them. But I think that that's great for people to take responsibility. But also, there are times that part of the work that I'm doing in therapy with people is saying that was actually not your fault. Like your parents didn't get a divorce because of you. Like, let's take this off of you and have it be on other people who are the ones who made the decisions. And especially also for someone where there's a perpetrator. I don't want the victim to have to take the responsibility for what a perpetrator does. Because I think, again, that's a way that the group is set up, I think, so that the leadership can get away with things. That's, again, my skeptical view. And so when you left, even though you were sure about leaving, did it leave you a bit confused about what is the part that you're playing and what is your responsibility? Like, did it get under your skin?
It got under my skin, except I like to learn things. So then I started looking into, is Landmark a cult? And I found Rick Ross's site and a bunch of people, and even on Reddit, there's a whole group on Landmark and is Landmark a cult? And that's when I discovered, I think it was Chris Shelton first, and Scientology. And I started going, wait a minute, this is familiar to me. This stuff is familiar to me. And I started following, I think it was Lloyd Evans at the time, and learned more about the Jehovah's Witnesses. I have a friend who is Mormon, so I thought, well, I could look up stuff about Mormonism and the LDS, and all the pieces started falling together, and thinking, wait a minute, this is culty. If it's not a cult, it's culty, definitely cultish. Rick Ross has since said, no, Landmark's not a cult. I tend to not agree with that. I think it's maybe not a flat out cult like Werner's L. Ron Hubbard, but because Werner's, well, he's still in the picture, but he's not in the picture. He's involved and he's not involved. Yeah, it just started making me want to learn more about cults and why people get involved in cults and what happens in cults and how they're formed. And I mean, I think I heard this recently. At any one time in America, there are 5,000 cults operating.
At least.
At
Mm-hmm.
least, yeah.
Yeah.
So it just piqued my interest in going down another rabbit hole.
Right.
Only a
Right.
rabbit hole of my choosing.
Yes, I was going to say this is a healthy one, and this is one that is good for information gathering and education. And yes, 5,000 at least. I mean, we could make a list that would be very extensive, and I hear about new groups every day. And sometimes people will call me and say, "Hey, have you heard about this group?" And they do this, and sometimes I haven't heard about that group because, again, new ones are starting all the time. But some are branches of other groups, and similar to it, us becoming the forum, becoming Landmark, sometimes things just are repackaged. I'm wondering then about the book because there's an interesting combo platter of Jehovah's Witness mixed in, right, with Scientology and with Landmark. So tell me about the weaving in of Jehovah's Witness. I think I understand it religiously, clinically, but tell me about that for you.
Well, when I wanted to write about my experience, my time at Landmark, my experience with Landmark, I changed the name of the group, so it isn't Landmark. It's about a man who gets invited to attend a forum, and he gets very involved in that and really likes it, and then he decides he wants to be involved in as a volunteer, as an assistant. He goes through the whole training process, and that's where I decided to involve Scientology and the JWs because I knew about them, one, and the Landmark piece was, I mean, parts of it actually, I think are fairly close to what some of the former staff people have have talked about with me, or that I've heard from them. But just that it gets abusive once you're into it is when you start to see the abuse happening, when things start to change. And so he goes through, and I wrote it so that it starts pre-pandemic and ends at the beginning of the lockdown, which changes everything. So, and he comes out of this experience wondering who he is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Which makes sense. That happens a lot.
Yeah. But
Okay.
yeah, in the book, the JW part is there's sort of a governing group of men who run the organization. Scientology, I think I included a few of the kind of the training routines. So just to put them in, and it's all kind of because Landmark, and yes, if you're watching this, don't sue me. It's not worth it. I have nothing.
I love that. Just don't.
Just don't.
Uh-huh. Just stop thinking about
Yeah.
that at all. Yes. Uh-huh. Right. Okay. Right. Training routines also, the TRs, as you mentioned before, the staring and all of that. What are some of the other ones that you noticed that they adopted or wove into Landmark?
The staring one was the one that I remember the strongest. They don't do anything like auditing, so there's no. But apparently, in the early days with S, they had an e-meter.
Oh, wow.
They actually
Interesting.
did use an e-meter. I heard that from
Wow.
somebody who was involved in the beginning, and they had an e-meter. The interesting thing about Werner and Scientology is Scientology has what they call an est repair rundown,
Wow.
which means like L. Ron Hubbard hated Werner so bad, so bad. He was declared suppressive. He was called, like, est was called a squirrel group, like an offshoot, an illegal offshoot of Scientology. Werner used a lot more, I think, of the confrontive Scientology stuff than Landmark. Landmark softened, but yeah, the est repair rundown, which is like talking to Chris Shelton, they probably still use it with Landmark people,
Interesting.
even after all these years.
And do you know what it's like or what they do in the est repair rundown?
It's an auditing session. So
Okay.
it's just to fix anything that you have stuck in your head from est, to get rid
Yes.
of that.
Interesting. So one cult group wants to deprogram you from the other cult group.
It's
Wow.
crazy. It's crazy, but yeah.
Wow. No, so we just keep coming back to the through the looking glass. Hello. Um,
Your
wow.
hair
Okay.
wants cutting.
Yes, exactly. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. So then what did you find out about Werner Erhard and sort of what he was about? Because it sounds like, you also wanted to study him and who he is.
Well, I haven't read it yet, but there's a book called, oh no, the name has left me. Um, Outrageous Betrayal. I've got a PDF copy of it, which is about Werner. And he, I mean, I only know bits and pieces. I have seen I think a couple of YouTube clips of him actually working at an est training session. So you can actually see Werner at work, and there's a couple of times he's done talks or interviews. Right now, I think he's in Europe, but he sold the company to his brother and sister, so they're now running it. His history was, as far as I know, Scientology. I don't know before that, and then dealing with Alan Watts, and then starting est, and then everything moving forward until he decided he was done with est and handing it off and turning it into Landmark, which, like you said at the beginning, has had so many different names, and it's the same thing. And now after COVID, most of it's online, which is, I would think, much harder for them to deal with, like LGATs and like large group awareness trainings online would be pretty tricky because you don't have control. Uh, A person can leave when they want to, although apparently you have to sign something that says you promise to keep your camera on at all times and you're only allowed breaks. And I suppose they have breakout rooms for people to do stuff on their breaks because you don't get, like I said, you don't get breaks. You have to work. Even dinner breaks is like you go with a group of people and you talk about stuff and talk about the forum.
Right. It's interesting too, because, with groups that are so high pressure, what I've dealt with and what I'm, trying to deal with now too with a number of people is that you not only have the injurious, I think, behavior towards members, where some are really put at risk, some are really taxed physically. I think about people who have come to me after having been in groups where they were n- they would rise up in the ranks to be able to volunteer, like be able to help. And then, like I know this with the Kabbalah Learning Center, that people ruined their knees from cleaning the toilets or setting up the chairs. They would ruin their backs. I mean, really, for you to talk about you having a back injury, even if it wasn't caused by being there, you would have been in good company with people who really did have a lot of physical fallout and injuries. And then you have the people in a position of leadership who become the leaders or co-leaders of different parts of it. They're exhausted too. They're pushed too. They're pushed to push other people, and they're part of the machine. And then a lot of them, similar to people who have recruited a lot of people into a group only to find out that it was unhealthy, and then they have trouble getting these friends out. The leadership not only feels injured by how they were treated, but then they have the moral injury on top of it. Same thing with people who've recruited. And Steve Hassan talks about that with the Moonies, that he was a really good recruiter and he feels terrible that he was a really good recruiter. But that they can see that they were passing along ideas, some of which were just pop psychology and not necessarily unhealthy, but others really were. And that was the answer for people. And they really had good intentions, but were feeding them medicine that turned out to be more poisonous than anything else. And so it affects everyone, really, except for the people at the very top who just benefit, I think, from the power and the money, but probably don't have the same kind of moral injury or they wouldn't keep doing it. That's my thought. What do you think?
I think that's accurate. I think, the higher up you are, the less pain you feel. The more you go down, although with Landmark, it's more like once you hit a staff level, then you start feeling the pain. As a participant, you don't see that stuff. You don't see any of the abuse. You don't see any of the scream. You just see the form. You just experience the brief high that you get. And then until that wears off, because it wears off, but just as a participant, you don't see what goes on. You don't see the man behind the screen or the man behind the curtain. You don't see any of that. And it's only until you leave and you start looking at it through a critical lens with critical thinking and saying, wait a minute, and you start researching, that's when you start to see the cracks in the wall that are like get wider and wider and wider the more you look at them.
Interesting. It's so interesting too, as you were just saying, just very briefly about with the leadership, when you are a member, no, you don't see the screaming and you don't see the pressure and you don't see the berating. But yeah, when you start talking to people, as I'm sure you did for your research too, you're talking to people who are in the upper echelons or who become instructors, if they're quote unquote out of line, if they're late for anything, if they say no to anything, I mean, that's when it gets very ugly for them. But they have to come across as having it all together and being very polished and very positive in order to be good instructors. But they're being watched too. And I think people don't realize that.
my experience with staff members, former staff members from Landmark is fairly recent. With after Anne's book, Anne Peterson's book came out, and just learning from talking to some of them or hearing their stories, just how much like it was like I had no idea. I had no even that little time I volunteered was enough for me to say, wait a minute, this is abusive. Even just as that in that one brief little span of time, day and a half, I could see, no, this is abusive. This isn't treating people like, I mean, I was an executive director and worked with volunteers a lot and a volunteer coordinator before, so I know they are gold. Volunteers are gold, and you treat them like gold. I was not treated like gold. I was treated like dirt. And the rest of us, the rest of the group that were working there were like, we were treated like crap. You're here to do what we tell you because you're here to do what we tell you.
And I wonder if there was also that sort of narcissistic kind of feeling, which wouldn't surprise me if some of these groups, like this group, are started by people with, I think, that personality disorder, that you should feel lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, you should feel lucky that you're being used as a workhorse for us.
I think so. I think, yes, you're absolutely right. It's an honor to be working for them, because otherwise you're just one of those outside people who don't understand the importance of the work that we're doing, that we're changing the world. It's like, no, you're not changing the world. How long has Landmark been around? I don't see the world changing. How long has Scientology been around? I don't see the world changing.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So I'm wondering if you were to say it just like that to a Landmark instructor, well, I don't see the world changing. Usually there is a very trained response to those sorts of things. How do you think they would respond to a comment like that?
I think they would deny it. I think they would say there's something wrong with me, that I'm not being authentic, or I'm being I'm being I'm being a suppressive person. I'm speaking against, which is wrong. You're not supposed to do. There was actually in the forum, there was one man who stood up and said, "Well, I have a good relationship with my daughter. Why do you want me to talk about my relationship?" Like, I wouldn't have that. And the forum leader went absolutely nuts. Started
Wow.
yelling at him. Oh, the forum leaders yell at people all the time. That's what Werner did. Werner essentially said, "You're an asshole and your life is fucked."
Wow. That's super spiritual. So,
Yeah.
and motivational somehow, psychologically? How? Really?
Well, it's to goad them into doing what he says.
Yeah. And what you noticed when you were leaving was that your life wasn't any better for having been there,
Nope.
and that's part of going into your feeling of betrayal, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. No, my life, did it change at all? Not really. While I carried the few bits of Landmark that I did around being like getting complete with people or being authentic with myself, those things I can still do. Like, being authentic is pretty it's a pretty easy thing, just being yourself. But did my life change? No. Chop wood, carry water.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And, but it is true, like with this whole idea of getting complete. Yeah, there is like in certain groups, making amends and, having the difficult conversations. And so it's not really necessarily a unique idea, but it can be helpful. And I think, yeah, if there are things that you've learned, take them, run with them, use them, because you gave a lot to get those things, and there should be some kind of payout from it. I'm wondering, just as we're finishing up, because the time goes by fast, if there were other points that you wanted to make sure to impart some ideas for people even to watch out for, or to not berate themselves, for having gotten involved in something like this.
Well, I think for people who've been involved in cults or high control groups, just call them high control groups, or high control relationships, to not beat themselves up if they get out, if they go through the same sense of betrayal. Don't beat yourself up for it, because it's like, yeah, you went through stuff. You weren't treated well. You're given false hope that doesn't, in the end, come true. I mean, they offer you great shiny trinkets, and they're just trinkets. There's nothing to them. It's costume jewelry, not diamonds.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful phrase. And speaking about phrases, I know when we were having a little dialogue on YouTube, um, when you were quoting from a Stephen Sondheim musical.
Or from Sweeney Todd, yeah.
Yeah, Sweeney Todd. I would love for you, just kind of coming full circle from you being a composer and a musician, to kind of end off with that, with what you were highlighting about Sweeney Todd. And if people haven't seen that musical, I highly recommend it. It is dark and very heavy, right? Very disturbing, but so much about the human condition and about the haves and the have-nots, and just a lot that will speak to a lot of people, I think, especially now. But what were the points that you were drawing from Sweeney Todd?
Well, I can't remember who you were talking to at the time when I said it, but it reminded me of, there's a line in A Little Priest, which is a lovely waltz about eating people. And I think the line goes, "What's the sound of the world, my sweet? Oh, Mr. Todd, Mr. Todd, what is that sound? It's who gets eaten and who gets to eat. Oh, Mr. Todd, who gets to sell?" So that's what really struck me. It's about, like, yeah, somebody gets to sell this and you're eating it.
Ah,
Or
wow.
you're eating it, or you're being eaten.
Eaton. Right, right. Wow. Okay.
But somebody's selling it.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. See, that gives me goosebumps. Okay. All right. So I want to thank you, Michael, for sharing what you experienced in your life, the things that you learned firsthand, and then being able to put together a book to help do a lot of education and hopefully a lot of prevention to people really become aware of what to notice and what's good to notice. And also to not kick yourself for what other people have, I think, knowingly done to you, and to not take it on yourself, and to see your part in it and that you're responsible for it, as the group would want you to think, so they don't have to take any responsibility, and not make it so easy for them to pass the responsibility off on you. So thank you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Well, thank you very much, Rachel. It's been an honor.
Thank you so much to Michael for all of his wonderful insights about his experiences, and so much of the history that he was able to share with us about his time in Landmark, and all that he was able to share with us also about Werner Erhard, and about Scientology and Jehovah's Witnesses. He knows his stuff. And there is a very interesting thing that happens out there in the world, where you meet people along the way who are listeners of a show, who care about what you do, who write in. And Michael is someone who I had been dialoguing with back and forth on social media after he would send in some comments about a show here and there. I feel like I've made new friends around the world through this podcast, through this endeavor, which has been very gratifying. I could also tell from some of the things that he wrote that he had a lot of insights and a lot of personal experience. So I thought, well, let me ask him to share them. And what I heard from him is so much of what I hear from so many people, where he shared so much of the language that is talked about, is taught in these groups, but also being able to really talk to someone who not only can say what happened to him, but also how he felt after. There's also the ridiculousness of the minutia that got highlighted in my interview with Michael, like when you're setting up the chairs in any of the forum meetings for Landmark, they have to be perfectly lined up and they have to be a certain amount of inches apart. In fact, there is someone else who had been on the show, I think last year, and she talked about one of the things that was most panic-inducing for her when she went to Landmark was that the chairs were so close together and she had long legs. She was tall and she could not get up without it being noticeable to everyone and without having to do the excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me, all the way down to this very tightly packed row in front, in back, and all the way to the front of the room and the back of the room. And from almost from one wall to the other wall width-wise. And that's intimidating for almost anyone. That would be something that would keep people sitting for a very long time, which might be why it's done that way on purpose, because they don't want to be the only one standing up, and on top of the only one standing up, making a lot of noise, needing to ask people to get up and move, being berated, I'm sure, along the way. And it should be that you have freedom of movement. In fact, that's a constitutionally protected right that should also exist within cults. One of the things also that he mentioned was some of this language that I talk about here on the show, the idea of transformation. And what does that mean? How do you define it? How do you know you've become transformed? What does it look like? Do you develop spots? Do you turn green? Do you grow a tail? I mean, is there anything that would let people know that you really have been transformed? Or is it just a notion and only they can let you know when you've reached it? And I suppose if they're a business, it doesn't make good financial sense for you to reach that point of full transformation. So I doubt people reach it. There was also this other phrase, getting complete, that you're supposed to get complete. Another ill-defined or non-definable term. When you get complete, that doesn't mean anything as a human being. Complete according to what? Complete according to whom? And how do you know you're there? It's not like running a race where there is a finish line and it's obvious. Getting complete is also something that you give over to the people who are in charge of this to decide when you've gotten there. And they're only going to have you get there, I think, when they're done with you. And cults that rely on having people in them and paying their way and staying in there so they can pay more and more, I think are going to pretty much guarantee that you never reach completion. And if you do, then you get complete on that level, but then there's a next level. And then this other phrase, you're supposed to declare your intention to create a possibility of something, something, something. Can like just, okay, what? What does that mean? If anyone knows what that means, please let me know. I have no idea. I don't know if people know. There is so much word salad that is involved in this, and we can tear it apart and we can also make fun of it because it's laughable at times, but it is the thing that keeps people stuck because they think there's something wrong with them, that they don't understand this, and they think there's something wrong with them, that they haven't reached this, or they don't really know how to put it into practice. There's also this idea that if you're supposed to declare your intention to create a possibility, then sometimes when you declare an intention, I guess your goal, I suppose, that's not necessarily going to be something that really is your goal in life, but it might be the goal that you think potentially that they want for you to have, or that's going to help you be liked in the eyes of the people there. Because it could be that when you declare your intention, it is to get out of there. That for a lot of people really is their intention. They can't say it, but they're done with it way before it's done with them. And they'd like their money back, and they'd like to get that time back. And they'd like to get their ability to feel good about themselves back, because now they're feeling angry, or they're feeling lied to, they're feeling that they were tricked, and they're feeling betrayed. And that is also something that Michael talked about. He felt what so many people felt after these experiences, that he felt betrayed after leaving. That should not be the emotion that you feel after so much work and so much self-sacrifice, so much devotion. You should feel fulfilled. You should feel happy. You should feel more educated. You should feel more directed, motivated, clearer about what you want to do and where you want to go in life, not betrayed. Thank you so much to Michael for spending some time with us today. It was great to talk to him, and I'll talk to you all next week. Thank you very much for listening. Please support IndoctriNation on Patreon at patreon.com/indoctrination. Be sure to give us a follow on our social media. Find us on Facebook and Instagram using @IndoctriNation Podcast. And for Twitter, find us at @_indoctrination. We love hearing from you too. So send us an email at indoctrinationshow@gmail.com. And for more updates on the show, visit our website at www.podpage.com/indoctrination.